I wanted to share a true horror story that happened to me. Not in the way you'd expect with ghosts and ghouls, but it was terrifying all the same. It started when I moved to this bustling city about a month ago for a new job. I was hired as a PE teacher at a well-regarded preschool close to my apartment. The apartment was on the 12th floor of an old but cozy building where the elevator ran from 6 a.m. to midnight. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's just where the story begins. So, one late evening, I stayed back at the preschool to complete some urgent work assigned by the principal. By the time I reached my apartment door, it was past midnight. The elevator being out of service, I had no choice but to use the stairs. The stairwell was surprisingly clean and well maintained, giving no hint of the horror that was about to unfold. As I reached the 8th floor, something caught my eye. A large, vibrant crayon drawing that covered an entire wall. It depicted various unrelated objects, trees, cars, animals, and houses. There was this one particular house in green with a pointy roof, next to which, in red crayon, were the words, "Johnny's Home." Just as I was taking it in, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I spun around but saw nothing except the staircase winding below me. The next morning, I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling and ended up asking an old lady who operated the elevator during the day. Her name was Mrs. Peach, and her reaction when I mentioned the drawing and Johnny was one of sheer terror. She told me Johnny was a little boy who lived on the 8th floor, but had tragically passed away a couple of months ago. He was a quiet child, known mostly for his love of drawing. The story took a darker turn on my 24th birthday. After a small celebration with friends, I came home late at night. Slightly tipsy, as I approached the 8th floor again, dread began to set in. The crayon drawing seemed to mock me, the scribbled words, "Johnny's Home," chilling me to the bone. I quickened my pace, telling myself it was all in my head. But then I noticed something odd. I was on the 9th floor, not the 8th. How did I end up here when I was certain I had been on the 8th floor just moments ago? In a panic, I rushed back downstairs only to find the wall blank. No drawings, no Johnny's Home, just cold, bare concrete. The next morning, shrouded in an unshakable chill, I stepped into the elevator only to be met by Mrs. Peach with unsettling news. The normally lively elevator operator, Mrs. Peach, was withdrawn. Her eyes filled with sorrow. She shared that her beloved pet dog had passed away last night, right in our building. The way she clutched the motionless body of her pet, combined with her tale of loneliness and loss, filled the small elevator space with a tangible sense of death. The absolute dread climaxed when, just before the doors closed, Mrs. Peach eerily shifted toward me, prompting me to realize I was trapped in a confined space with grief and death only inches away. My heart pounded as I hurriedly exited on my floor, swearing to move out at the earliest. The final straw came a few days later. My resolve to leave was cemented when I discovered that not just pets, but also people in the building were mysteriously dying, one after another. Each tragic death was preceded by those unsettling crayon drawings appearing near their homes. It was as if the drawings were an omen, a harbinger of death. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was using these simple crayon drawings to mark their next victim. And terrifyingly, I realized that I recognized those drawings. They weren't just the imaginings of a child, but a sign of something far more sinister. Fearing for my life, I hastily packed my belongings and arranged to stay with a colleague until I could find a new place to live. On my last night in that apartment, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but wonder about Johnny, the quiet boy with a love for crayons, and the uncanny link between his art and the unfathomable darkness that seemed to engulf the building since his passing. It's been weeks since I moved out, and while I'm now safe in my new apartment, the memory of those crayon drawings and the sequence of chilling events that followed haunt me still. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the simplest things can harbor the deepest horrors. Thanks for letting me share. Stay safe out there. It's something that happened to me during my junior year at an art college in the States. My major was fine arts, and let me tell you, the competition was fierce. To stand out, you had to be more than good. You had to be extraordinary. So I was constantly on the lookout for any place I could find to practice my drawing and painting in peace. One day, almost by accident, I found an old studio on the 7th floor of our college building. It was odd, because I hadn't seen it before, and nobody ever talked about it. This part of the building was practically deserted, mainly because it was close to an old electrical room, and people were wary of radiation or whatever. But there was this studio locked up with a huge, rusty padlock that practically fell apart when I touched it. It seemed like I had discovered my own secret paradise. Thrilled, I decided this was going to be my new spot. I spent almost every waking moment there, painting without end. Sometimes I was so exhausted, I'd just crash on the studio table and sleep for hours. One evening, I woke up with a start. My body felt numb from sleeping in such an awkward position. But that wasn't what startled me. The door, which I always kept shut, was wide open. I felt this immediate sense of dread, as if someone was watching me. My first thought was to close the door, quickly. I had barely relaxed when I noticed, sitting across from me, a girl in a white dress with long dark hair, just sitting there, not moving at all. I couldn't understand how she'd gotten in, or why I hadn't heard her. My mind raced with panic. Before I could do anything rational, the girl spoke in a soft, almost haunting voice, asking me to draw her portrait because she couldn't remember her own face. Something in her tone sent shivers down my spine, but before I could refuse, I felt an invisible force pulling me back to my seat, compelling me to start drawing. The session felt like it lasted forever. When I finally finished and looked up, the girl was right beside me, lamenting that the portrait didn't quite capture her. In my dazed state, I couldn't process her words fully until she did something unimaginable. She began to mutilate her face, saying that if she couldn't match the portrait, she'd make the portrait match her by taking her own features and trying to merge them with my drawing. I was frozen in horror, witnessing this grotesque transformation. Her actions became more frantic and her figure became increasingly disfigured. I was on the verge of passing out from fear when she suddenly stopped. Turning to me with a chilling smile, she asked if she looked better now. I screamed. I screamed until my voice gave out. But no one came. The next thing I remember, I was waking up not in the studio, but in the hospital. My roommate had found me collapsed near the old electrical room, with my art supplies scattered around me. She said I had been fainting due to malnutrition and stress, but I couldn't accept that. I knew what I experienced wasn't just a hallucination caused by hunger or fatigue. After some prodding, my roommate revealed that there used to be an art studio on the 7th floor 10 years ago. A talented girl who wore white dresses was constantly bullied over false rumors. Overwhelmed by despair, she committed suicide in that studio. Since then, bizarre incidents occurred to anyone who found the studio, until a fire destroyed part of the building years ago. I've never seen the studio again after that night. The experience, though, it transformed my art. My work gained a new depth of emotion that garnered the attention of my professors, earning me an opportunity to study abroad. Though I've tried to move on, I often find myself wondering about the girl in the white dress. Was she real or just a figment of my stressed subconscious? Either way, she changed the course of my career, and that haunted studio on the 7th floor will forever be etched in my memory. I'm a recent grad from an art school, and like many in my field, jobs weren't exactly hanging off trees, so I ended up freelancing, doing illustrations for magazines to pay the bills. Most of my work ended up locked away in an old wooden chest because, let's face it, not everything gets picked up. Spending hours hunched over my work, I started experiencing back pain, to the point where I was worried I might end up with a permanent hunch. Silly as it sounds, being single and already self-conscious about my looks, the thought terrified me. Just when I was at my lowest, a new neighbor moved in next door. This guy could have been a double for Chris Hemsworth or any Hollywood heartthrob you can think of. It seemed like he took an interest in me. He'd always peek into my window and flash a smile my way whenever our eyes met. My heart would race every time. I guess I developed a small crush on him. One cold morning, I found a bag of coal at my doorstep with a note attached. It read, "Saw you needed coal. It's $20. I was grateful, since hauling coal from the market was a hassle, especially in winter. Trying to find a way to thank him, I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. That evening, when I caught him passing by my window, he politely declined my attempt to reimburse him and instead asked if I could paint his portrait. We quickly got to know each other after that. He was very supportive when he found out about my back pain, even mentioning he knew of a posture corrector that could help and insisted on buying it for me. For a while, I didn't see much of him, and the loneliness was almost unbearable. I worried he might have moved out One day I went over, ready to knock, but as I lifted my hand, the door swung open. He looked exhausted but never mentioned the posture corrector again, and his behavior started to get weird. He stopped leaving his apartment and told me he wanted to become an artist like me, which was odd because I never saw any of his work. Despite this, he had an impressive understanding of art, and his suggestions helped me improve my pieces significantly. Wanting to repay his kindness, I offered to buy him dinner, but he only asked for some of my drawing supplies. My work began gaining more recognition, and I decided to revisit some old pieces stored under my bed. I asked him for help moving the heavy chest, but when I went to find him, my landlord confusingly told me that he hadn't lived there for months. Confused and a little scared, I insisted on checking his apartment. It was covered in dust, and there on the wall was the portrait I painted of him. It looked almost too real, and for a moment I thought I saw him blink in the painting. That night, the light in his supposed-to-be empty apartment was on. Driven by curiosity, I snuck a peek through his window and saw him painting over the portrait I had done, his face horribly disfigured, as if in pain. Frightened, I fled back to my place. And the next day, my landlord frantically informed me that he had passed away in a car accident months ago. I verified the news and confirmed that he had died on the day he promised to buy the posture corrector for me. In shock and fearing his painting, I decided to burn it. As the flames consumed the canvas, I saw his angry face accusing me of destroying his last hope. I decided to move out the next day, but before I could, I received a package. Inside was the posture corrector he'd promised to get me. It dawned on me that he must have sent it just before the accident happened. Tears streaming down my face, I put on the posture corrector, sat down, and began to draw. In my mind, he sat across from me, smiling as I sketched. Thanks for letting me share my story. It's been therapeutic in a way. If anyone has experienced anything remotely similar, feel free to share. Growing up in a small town in upstate New York, art always had a special place in my heart. Though I never went to college, my passion for painting gave me a purpose. I was known in town for my skills, able to capture anything from the most majestic landscapes to the subtle nuances of human expressions. In our town, where modern convenience hadn't entirely erased the need for traditional craftsmanship, my talent for decorative furniture painting was highly sought after, especially for important family events. One spring, my old classmate Mike approached me with a personal request. His sister Lily was getting married, and as part of her dowry, they had prepared a handmade wardrobe, a cherished tradition in our area. This wardrobe was crafted by a local carpenter who was renowned for his meticulous work, and now it was my turn to add the finishing touches with my paint. Mike and I had grown up together, and he knew my reputation well. He wanted the wardrobe to be perfect for Lily, emphasizing the importance of this piece in her new life. Despite the pressure, I agreed without hesitation, not just because of our friendship, but because this was what I did best. The moment I saw Lily, I understood the true meaning of inspiration. She was unmistakably beautiful, with a grace and elegance that seemed almost otherworldly. Painting the wardrobe suddenly felt like a sacred task, an offering to the beauty and purity Lily embodied. As I worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of longing and admiration for Lily. I knew she was already spoken for, but I couldn't control my heart's desires. This unrequited love became a source of profound sadness, and my life quickly spiraled into loneliness and despair. In a particularly dark moment, driven by a mix of love, frustration, and a sense of injustice, I decided to pour all my feelings into one final masterpiece. This painting wasn't for the wardrobe, but something personal, a creation that symbolized my unspoken love for Lily. I worked on it in solitude, channeling every ounce of my emotion onto the canvas. However, fate seemed to mock my efforts. On a brief leave from my studio, a stray dog, a frequent, albeit usually harmless visitor to our neighborhood, snuck in and completely ruined my painting. The creature, likely searching for food or simply curious, had knocked over paint torn through the canvas and left a trail of chaos in its wake. Returning to see my work of art destroyed, I was devastated. My mother tried to console me, suggesting I simply start over, but she couldn't understand. This wasn't just any painting. It was the manifestation of my love and pain, irreplaceable, and now irretrievably lost. The incident broke something inside me. The rejection I felt from Lily, compounded by the destruction of my painting, led me into a dark place. I began to question everything, losing interest in art, withdrawing from my friends and family, and struggling to find meaning in life. Fueled by anguish and a feeling of helplessness, I made a drastic decision. In a moment of utter despair, I attempted to end my own life, seeing no other escape from the pain I was enduring. Fortunately, my attempt was unsuccessful. The realization of the impact my actions would have had on my family and friends, the real, tangible connections I had overlooked in my fixation on an idealized love, sparked a long, challenging journey towards healing and recovery. Looking back now, I see this period of my life as a testament to the complex tapestry of human emotions. The experience taught me the importance of resilience, the value of real, supportive relationships, and the undeniable power of art to both destroy and heal. It's a chapter of my life I rarely speak about, but I share it here in the hope that it might help someone else feeling trapped in their own spiral of despair. Remember, even in our darkest moments, there is always a path forward, though it may not be the one we expected. This story, dramatized for the sake of narrative, aims to capture the essence of human struggle, highlighting the less spoken about aspects of mental health challenges. Last night, I found myself unable to shake off this ominous feeling, my chest tight, head spinning, and a nauseous sensation engulfing me without relief. I was slumped on my couch, paralyzed, my thoughts a chaotic whirlpool, my vision blurred. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was meant to be the day of my first date with my boyfriend, Alex. How did it turn into this nightmare? Our meeting was nothing short of a miraculous alignment of the stars. I stumbled upon him in a privately owned bookstore during one of my many escapes from the suffocating atmosphere of high school. Unlike my academically driven peers, I found solace in wandering the streets, especially during those rare, tranquil afternoons. Despite barely making it into a reputable high school through a special admission that cost my parents a small fortune, I struggled to keep up. I felt out of place among my brilliant classmates, plagued by a sense that I didn't belong. That day in the bookstore, as I wandered aimlessly, I was drawn to a book titled Seasons of Life. Its cover depicting a serene golden pond surrounded by lush trees. Authored by Evan S. The tranquility of the scene resonated with me, compelling me to dive into its pages. The book chronicled the author's year through diary entries, mirroring my own sense of alienation and yearning for a life beyond the rigid expectations of my family and school. It felt as though I had found a soulmate, in Evan's words. After finishing the book, I discovered an email address on the last page, and driven by an impulse fueled by admiration and affinity, I sent a detailed email expressing my thoughts. To my surprise, Evan replied. Thus began our correspondence, a modern-day pen-pal friendship that soon blossomed into something more. Evan, a few years my senior, revealed himself to be an aspiring artist, casting aside societal expectations to pursue his passion for painting. Our exchange of photos and thoughts deepened my affection for him. Evan even sketched my portrait using one of my photos, capturing my essence in a way I didn't think possible. Before long, I found myself falling for him. However, my academic life suffered as a result. My disinterest in school became more pronounced, much to the chagrin of my teachers and parents. Yet none of that mattered to me. I was in love. One day, my world came crashing down. My high school teacher confronted me with a photo of a young man I knew as Evan, revealing his past as a once promising student at my school who tragically succumbed to mental health struggles and was forced to leave. Refusing to believe her, I clung to the belief that our connection was destiny. Evan had invited me to visit him, and on the day of our planned meeting, I dressed with care, eager for our first face-to-face encounter. Yet here I am, recounting the horror of that day. The woman who picked me up from the train station, who I assumed was Evan's mother, led me to their home. After drinking a cup of tea she served, I found myself incapacitated. With a gentle yet haunting voice, she explained the truth. Evan, my dear Evan, had taken his own life at 18, crushed under the weight of expectations. The woman was his grieving mother, who had published his diary entries in a vain attempt at redemption. She confessed to placing the book in the store, hoping to share her son's legacy. The sketch, the emails, all were her attempts to maintain a connection to her lost son. As the reality set in, so did a chilling realization. Alex wanted companionship, she whispered, her actions misguided by a mother's despair. My vision faded to black, my heart's beat the only sound in the engulfing darkness. And then, in that silence, I saw him, Alex, smiling and walking towards me. As I took a final deep breath, I realized the truth too late. This isn't just a story, it's a warning about the dangers lurking in the shadows of our desire for connection and acceptance. Please be cautious about who you trust online.